Here we see the surroundings of the slum area in Kampala, Uganda, where the founder of the Tezira Trust, Proscovia Wagaba, and one of our representatives in Uganda, Rabina, visited a number of children with learning disabilities and their mothers in July 2015 to undertake a needs assessment of the children. We spoke to the parents about their children and their families and about the Tezira Trust and our aims and objectives. Proscovia, Rabina and our guide Olivia arrive at the home of our first family to interact with the two children with learning disabilities and their mother. This is the home of 5-year-old Derek, who has Down syndrome and learning disabilities and a range of health problems. Derek is a cheerful little boy who loves to play, but he does have to cope with a lot of difficulties in his life. He didn't start talking until he was 5, and he still has problems with some motor skills. He's also had a lot of illness and chest infections, which have sometimes resulted in hospital stays. Whilst he can understand most of what is said to him, Derek has problems with his speech, and so finds it hard to communicate, which can sometimes lead to frustration and difficult behaviour. Derek lives with his mother, Betty, in a one-room house in the slums of Kampala. She also looks after his 6-year-old cousin Ian, who also has learning disabilities. With 2 young disabled children to care for, Betty is unable to hold down a regular job. She struggles to support the family and washes the clothes of other people in the slums around her to eke out a living, but does not make enough to pay for basic necessities such as nutritious food and for her children. The family does not currently get any support for the children's disability or their basic needs. Here Derek's mother Betty tells us about her situation and his health problems when he was a baby and the numerous visits she made to hospital. Proscovia and Robina then go to the home of Harriet, who has physical and learning disabilities, talking to Harriet's mother Jane. 8-year-old Harriet cannot sit or stand unaided. She cannot talk, feed herself or care for her own needs. The only support her mother has received is the donation of a wheelchair. Harriet's mouth is full of sores and she needs dental treatment, but there's no money to pay for it. The slums that Harriet lives in are not wheelchair friendly, and her mother has no transport, so Harriet rarely leaves her home. Jane works long hours in a low-paid job in Kampala and usually leaves the house at 7 a.m. and doesn't get back until 6 p.m. Harriet stays in the house by herself with a friend or neighbour watching over her and giving her food when they can. Harriet is doubly incontinent, but her mother cannot afford incontinence pads. Her mother feeds and cleans her up when she gets home. Here Jane tells us about Harriet's difficulties. She was okay when she was born, and then she got sick with flu-like symptoms at about 3 months. I took her to a local clinic and they kept on giving me syrup, but she kept on getting worse. She became very unwell and deteriorated. She wasn't growing or developing normally. She cannot sit or stand or feed herself. I have to do everything for her. I don't get any help. When I go to work, I have to leave her in the house. My friend used to give her food when I'm at work, but she doesn't do it anymore. Harriet's mother, Jane, struggles with the wheelchair that was given to her by a local charity. The slums where she lives are not wheelchair-friendly, and the bulky chair is difficult to manoeuvre, but it has been useful in helping to strengthen her back and limbs, and it makes it possible for her to sit up, giving her some independence. Harriet clearly loves her chair. Her mother Jane asks Proscovia, "I forgot to ask, I have an older son. Can he also be helped by this programme?" Proscovia answers, "If he hasn't got disabilities like Harriet, then unfortunately we can't include him in this programme, as it's specifically for children with disabilities." Most of the parents we saw had other children without disabilities who also lacked basic needs, such as food and clothing, that were not being met, and who were not attending school due to lack of school fees. These parents nevertheless continued to care for their disabled children, sometimes sending the able children back to the village to stay with relatives. We did come across other disabled children elsewhere that had been abandoned. These drains crisscross the slums where the children live, and we had to constantly jump over them to get from house to house. The drains carry rubbish and sometimes human waste, along with a number of diseases. Children living there are vulnerable to illness and infections, including malaria. Disabled children are even more vulnerable, as they usually already have a number of health issues. 3.5-year-old Aaron has cerebral palsy and needs round-the-clock care. He cannot speak, sit without help, or walk. He also has visual problems. His parents have received very little help for basic needs or to support his disability. He also has visual problems for which he's not getting any help. One doctor told his mother, "If you're lucky, he might die early." Aaron's parents have another child and also take care of their nephew. All 5 of them live in one room in the slum areas of Kampala. Whilst Aaron's father has a job, he earns very little money and cannot afford to pay for the specialist therapies and education that Aaron needs. He's only 3, so it's difficult to say what effect the cerebral palsy will have on him. In the West, many people with cerebral palsy are able to live happy, fulfilling lives with the right support. But at the moment, Aaron and his parents are not getting any support. Aaron's mum describes her experience. "I realised something was very wrong when he turned 6 months and he wasn't developing. So I took him to hospital and was told that the sickness he has could not be cured and that he wouldn't develop like other children. I would love him to attend a school for children like him. We hear that these schools exist, but they're very expensive. Being with other children would help him develop his confidence. At the moment, he's afraid of other people because he spends all his time with me. The first doctor I took him to told me to go home and be strong because this illness is incurable. He told me that his brother had a child like that, but that, luckily enough for him, the child died at the age of 2. Then he said that if it is God's will, this child could even live up to the age of 20, so you just have to accept, be patient, and care for him for the rest of his life." Watson is a delightful little boy who has development delay and learning disability. He has not been properly assessed, so like the other children, he could have a lot of potential with the right intervention. He cannot walk or undertake basic self-care. He's completely reliant on his mother for everything. He can only say a handful of words, but despite all this 5-year-old is a friendly little boy who is desperate to interact with people. He currently doesn't attend any school or play activities and is stuck at home with his mother. Tell us the problems you've faced with Watson. He can't walk. He's just started sitting at 5. It looks like his bones are weak. I do everything for him, including feeding and toileting. So what do you do with him in relation to toileting? Do you put him in Pampers? Mary laughs. I don't have money for Pampers. I tie small cloths around him and clean him up when he soils himself. I'm not getting any support at the moment, apart from physiotherapy twice a month. We need support with everything, including all the basic needs, food and clothing. I don't work. I have 3 other children. Only one of them attends school, and I have to find the school fees somehow, even though I don't work. Four-year-old Arthur is autistic, doesn't speak, and has difficulty with feeding, toileting, and social interaction. He doesn't go to school and spends all day around his grandmother's small market stall, repeatedly lining up and dismantling the tomatoes that his grandmother sells. He lives in a small house in the slum areas of Kampala with his mother, grandmother, and twin sisters. His mother told us that she needs help with everything, including basic needs, special education, and medication, as he sometimes gets frustrated and hyperactive. He's not developing normally. He has difficulty feeding. He needs medication because he sometimes has problems with his brains. He doesn't go to school, and I have no hope of sending him to school because schools for children like this are very expensive, and I have no money. We hear there's a special school in Entebbe, which is a day school, but it's very expensive. He also needs support with all the basic needs. You see, we live in the slum areas, and sometimes the authorities come and tell us to move on without warning. He doesn't speak. Occasionally he'll say mum spontaneously. We've been told he's autistic, but have never had any help or support with his condition. 4-year-old Alvin cannot speak or feed himself. His understanding is limited. He has visual problems and needs round-the-clock care. His family is very poor, so has been unable to have Alvin properly assessed, but it's clear that he has a learning disability. His mother told us that he had a traumatic birth, which left him needing oxygen for the first few days of his life and led to difficulties with his feeding. Alvin lives with his parents and 3 siblings in one small room in the slums of Kampala. His father is a security guard, while his mother sells pancakes with Alvin on her back. They have very little money, so cannot always afford school fees for the children, despite desperately wanting them to have an education. When we visited them, it was clear that Alvin was in pain and very withdrawn. Without access to a proper assessment, no one knows exactly what his diagnosis is or how he can be helped. Jordan was born with low birth weight. He slept a lot, but his mother at first was not aware that he had any problems until she noticed he had a hernia. His mother first took him to the hospital and was told that he had problems with his brain. She was referred to a neuroclinic, but they told her there were problems with his brains. She just took him home and stayed there. He hasn't had any other assessments since then. He cannot speak, sit or walk or hold anything with his hands. He is able to say Mum and Dad, and he understands when you speak to him. His mother was visibly upset when she told us that she needs help with everything. With a child like this, I cannot leave him with anyone. I have to look after him myself, so can't go to work. With a proper assessment and support to access relevant therapies, Jordan can be helped to achieve his potential. This was our visit to a home in Kampala, where an amazing lady called Sister Teresa looks after disabled people who have no other help or support, including disabled children and young people, who are for the most part abandoned or left outside the gate. The home also looks after adults and elderly people who have become disabled or paralysed as a result of accidents, as well as the disabled children who have no one else to look after them. The home relies entirely on donations from well-wishers in the form of money and equipment. One of the greatest needs is for incontinence pads, which are very expensive in Uganda. The purpose of our visit was to identify disabled children and young people to assess their needs. We saw several disabled children and young people who mainly spent their day lying on a mat in the grounds outside with no specialist input or support. They are well fed and looked after, but they have no access to stimulating or play activity, physio or occupational therapy, and a few who are severely disabled.
It's really convenient.
Okay. This is the room where we can treat the children with different disabilities, and it's a room where we can treat our people here in the center. They need for physio, for changing environment, special care. Yeah, then when he gets okay, then he went back to the dormitory. Yeah, and we need some beds because now it's empty.
Only got one bed.
Now I've got one bed. I need some medicine. I need some cabinet. And tables, there is nothing at this moment. So I'm requesting anybody who can assist me is highly welcome. Thank you.
Tezira Trust is raising funds to set up a day centre in Kampala, which children like Harriet and Aaron will be able to access on a daily basis. They'll be properly assessed and will gain access to stimulating play activities, physio and speech and language therapy, together with individual support plans to enable them to achieve their potential. To donate, please use the Donate Now button on our website or contact us for more information. Thank you for your support.